Here's a couple of videos on the Vietnam War and how the United States dealt with guerrilla warfare. I find this quite interesting. Check these videos out.
Do you know why the Vietnam War happened? It all started in 1954, when Vietnam gained independence from the French. But instead of coming together, the country was split in two. The North turned communist while the South didn't. And this terrified the United States because of something called the domino effect. You see, Americans feared that if Vietnam fell to communism, the rest of Asia might follow, one after another. So the US stepped in to support the South. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union and China backed the North. What began as a fight for independence quickly turned into a brutal Cold War battle, lasting years and costing millions of lives.
These are some deadly traps that were used in the Vietnam War. These spikes were placed on two boards and placed below the ground and covered with soil, so that when soldiers stepped on them, the spikes would penetrate their legs. Two safety pins were removed and inserted into an empty can and tied to thin ropes. When soldiers walked into this trap, the entire group used to blow up, and the last one was punji sticks. The punji sticks had sharp, long spikes, which were buried in a wooden box and covered in soil. Whenever soldiers walked past this trap, the spikes pierced their legs and caused immense pain.
This is how Vietnam War tunnels worked in the war against the United States. They had weapon factories where they made landmines from unexploded explosives from American soldiers. Light in the tunnels comes from this bicycle generator. That's also how they got power for underground cinemas where soldiers watch movies to boost the fighting spirit. The same generators powered their hospitals. Entrances were hidden on the ground and in high places, but not invisible. That's why the tunnels were loaded with traps. If an enemy soldier made it inside, the Viet Cong would hide in secret rooms with a small hole in a thin layer of dirt, and when an enemy approaches the wall, they would immediately get stabbed by the Vietnamese soldiers. Some had a worse fate, because at the top of this tunnel, a Viet Cong soldier is waiting to drop a grenade, then blocking the way to block in the explosion. You might wonder why they didn't just gas them. Well, they did, but the gas would be stopped by trap doors or water placed inside. Vietnamese soldiers used a unique combat method to fight off Americans in the Vietnam War in 1954 to 1975. The guerrilla tactic. While the U.S. military had overwhelming firepower and technology on their side, the Vietnamese built an extensive tunnel that traveled across the country underground in jungles that allowed them to hide and launch surprise attacks. They also played mind games with American soldiers by building booby traps and fake ambushes to instill fear in U.S. troops. I guess you could say they worked smarter, not harder.
Yes, but the United States had an answer. Check this out.
Clear out enemy tunnels? The Viet Cong built vast underground tunnel networks to hide and launch surprise attacks. To counter this, the U.S. forces used flamethrowers to flush out enemies and destroy hidden supply caches. It was one of the most intense and dangerous forms of tunnel warfare.
The Vietnam War lasted from 1955 to 1975 between North Vietnam and South Vietnam. North Vietnam allies was China and the Soviet Union, while the South Vietnam was the United States and other anti-communist nations. So I just want to salute all the soldiers and fallen soldiers that was in Vietnam.